October 12th, 1944. The morning fog clung to the fields of northern France like a tattered blanket, obscuring the rural farmhouse of Marcel Beaumont from the world. The distant rumble of aircraft had become as common as birdsong, barely registering in the consciousness of the 58-year-old widower, as he prepared for another day of tending to what remained of his small farm. Marcel believed himself to be safely beyond the reach of the war that had consumed Europe, protected by his isolation and insignificance. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. What Marcel could never have anticipated was how a single act of compassion during the chaos would connect his humble existence to the highest echelons of military command, forever changing his understanding of humanity amid the greatest conflict the world had ever known. The farmhouse stood alone amid fields that had once yielded bountiful harvests of wheat and barley. Now, 4 years into occupation, Marcel managed only enough to sustain himself and occasionally barter with neighbors. His weathered hands, spotted with age and marked by decades of agricultural labor, worked methodically as he kindled a small fire in the stone hearth that dominated his sparse kitchen. The morning routine had remained unchanged for nearly 2 decades, ever since influenza had claimed his beloved wife, Mathilde. Their only son, François, had moved to Paris in '39, just before the war began. The last letter Marcel had received, nearly a year ago, mentioned François working with friends in the city. Marcel suspected resistance activities, but preferred not to know details. Another day, another struggle with these stubborn potatoes, Marcel muttered to himself, a habit developed over years of solitude. He addressed his comments to the faded photograph of Mathilde that hung above the fireplace. Her gentle smile, captured in 1923, had been his only companion through the long, silent evenings of occupation. The eastern field might be ready by Friday if the weather holds. Radio reports indicated intensified aerial operations across the region. Allied forces had been pushing steadily eastward since the Normandy landings 4 months prior. But the countryside remained nominally under German control. Marcel had developed a careful neutrality. He neither collaborated nor openly resisted. His farm was too small to warrant requisitioning, and at his age the authorities had little interest in him. This carefully cultivated invisibility had served him well. Lieutenant Colonel Heinrich Wagner of the German 7th Army surveyed the tactical map spread across the requisitioned manor house 30 kilometers north of Marcel's farm. Intelligence reports suggested Allied paratroop drops were imminent across the region, part of Operation Market Garden. Wagner's daughter, Elise, 12 years old with braided blonde hair and serious blue eyes that mirrored her father's, sat quietly in the corner of the operations room, sketching in a small notebook. Her presence was unusual, but unavoidable. Her mother had been killed in an Allied bombing of Berlin 3 months earlier, and arrangements to send her to relatives in Bavaria had fallen through. The British 8th will attempt to establish forward positions along these coordinates, Wagner explained to his staff officers, his voice carrying the clipped precision of a career military man. Our orders are to establish defensive positions here, here, and here. His finger traced potential strong points on the map. Ensure fuel reserves are distributed accordingly. We cannot afford mobility issues should rapid redeployment become necessary. Captain Möller, Wagner's adjutant, glanced at Elise. Sir, perhaps we should discuss contingency plans for non-combatants. The situation is becoming increasingly— My daughter remains with me until secure transport is arranged, Wagner interrupted, his tone making clear the subject was closed. 27 years of military service had instilled in him an absolute confidence in his command decisions, whether tactical or personal. Preparations for possible withdrawal should proceed according to Directive 18. That includes securing all communications equipment and intelligence documents. Production reports from factories across the Reich showed alarming downward trends. Where once German industry produced 7,500 aircraft monthly, output had fallen to under 3,000. Meanwhile, Allied factories in Britain and America were producing over 10,000 each month. Wagner had seen the reports. The imbalance was becoming insurmountable. The Messerschmitt plant near Munich, which had once employed 14,000 workers producing 30 fighters daily, now struggled to complete 15 aircraft with a workforce depleted by conscription and bombing. "Father," Elise said quietly as the officers dispersed to their assignments, "I finished another drawing." She held out her notebook, showing a detailed sketch of a farmhouse surrounded by fields. "I saw it from the car yesterday." Wagner's stern expression softened momentarily as he examined the drawing. "Very precise, Elise. You have your mother's eye for detail." He checked his watch. 1900 hours. "Time for dinner. Captain Möller will escort you to the dining room." As Elise left, Wagner turned back to the maps, noting the proximity of Allied air bases. Calculation told him they had perhaps 48 hours before their position would become untenable. Sentiment told him he could not bear to lose his daughter as he had lost his wife. Logic and emotion warred within him, as they had increasingly in recent months. That evening, Marcel sat at his wooden table eating a simple stew of rabbit and the few vegetables his garden had produced. The distant thunder of aircraft had grown more persistent throughout the day. Experience had taught him to distinguish between the deeper rumble of Allied bombers and the higher pitch of German fighters. Tonight, both filled the air in concerning numbers. At 21:30 hours, the first explosions illuminated the horizon to the north. Marcel stepped onto his porch, watching flashes transform the night sky into an unnatural day. Anti-aircraft fire traced luminous patterns upward, while flares drifted slowly downward, casting eerie shadows across his fields. The target appeared to be the transportation junction and command center where German forces had established headquarters. "Too close for comfort," Marcel murmured, calculating the distance. The experience suggested 15 to 20 kilometers, close enough to hear and see, but far enough to avoid immediate danger. He had survived 39 bombing raids over 4 years by understanding the patterns of modern warfare. This knowledge told him to remain indoors until morning. This night, however, fate had different plans. The German command post erupted in frantic activity as the first bombs fell. Wagner directed operations from the communications bunker, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Second company to fallback positions. Ensure anti-aircraft batteries maintain dispersed fire patterns." Around him, the apparatus of a military command fought to respond coherently to the precision bombing. "Sir," Captain Müller reported, his uniform covered in plaster dust, "direct hit on the north wing. Fire suppression teams are responding, but damage is extensive." "Casualties?" Wagner asked, marking updated positions on his map. 17 confirmed. Medical teams are... The rest of Müller's report was obliterated by a deafening explosion that plunged the bunker into darkness. Emergency lights flickered on seconds later, revealing fallen equipment and injured personnel. Wagner's first thought cut through military discipline with primal intensity. "Elise, where is my daughter?" "Last seen in the East Wing dormitory, sir," Müller responded, already anticipating his commander's priority. "Coordinate defensive operations, Captain. I will return momentarily." Wagner's tone permitted no discussion as he moved toward the exit. The East Wing dormitory had suffered a direct hit. Where an orderly room had stood now lay a tangle of concrete and wooden beams. German medics worked systematically through the rubble, extracting the injured with practiced efficiency. Wagner searched each face, fear growing with each passing moment. "Father," the small voice came from behind him. Wagner turned to find Elise, her face smudged with dust but otherwise unharmed. "I was in the garden when it started. The guard told me to stay in the trench." Relief flooded through Wagner, quickly replaced by tactical assessment. The command post was clearly compromised. Secondary explosions indicated the fuel depot had been hit. Intelligence suggested this was merely the first wave. "Captain," Wagner addressed Möller, who had followed him despite orders, "prepare Evacuation Protocol 3, priority for communications equipment and operational documents." "And your daughter, sir?" Wagner looked at Elise, calculation and devotion warring within him. "Sergeant Hoffmann will transport my daughter to fallback position Delta with the first convoy. I will command rearguard operations." The transport truck carrying Elise and 6 other non-combatants departed at 22:15 hours. Wagner watched it disappear into the darkness, forcing himself to return to the immediate tactical situation. 3 minutes later, The second bombing wave began. Marcel was preparing for bed when he heard the distinctive sound of aircraft engines sputtering. Experience told him immediately, a damaged bomber attempting to maintain altitude. He stepped outside again, squinting upward. Against the star-filled sky, he could make out the silhouette of what appeared to be a British Lancaster. One engine trailing smoke, another apparently dead. The aircraft was losing altitude rapidly, too close for comfort. The bomber passed overhead at what Marcel estimated to be less than 1,000 feet, the aircrew visibly fighting for control. It disappeared beyond the tree line to the east, followed seconds later by a dull explosion that illuminated the night sky. Marcel hesitated only briefly before retrieving his coat and lantern. Downed aircrews were a complicated matter. German patrols would certainly be searching by morning. His sympathy lay with the Allies, but self-preservation had kept him alive this long. Just to check for survivors, he told himself, knowing the bitter October night would kill any injured men before dawn. No need to get involved beyond that. The crash site was approximately 1 kilometer east of his farm, marked by scattered debris and a small fire, where the port wing had separated. The main fuselage had carved a deep furrow through a fallow field before coming to rest against a stand of oak trees. Marcel approached cautiously, lantern held low. His assessment was grim. The impact had been devastating. The cockpit section was crushed beyond recognition. He was turning to leave when a sound caught his attention, not from the wreckage, but from the darkness beyond. Marcel raised his lantern, revealing nothing. Then it came again, a soft whimper, barely audible above the crackling of small fires consuming scattered wreckage. "Hello?" Marcel called softly in French, then attempted broken English. "Is anyone there? Are you hurt?" Movement from beneath a section of torn wing material. Marcel approached carefully, heart pounding. War created dangerous situations, wounded soldiers, unexploded ordnance, trigger-happy patrols. The wing section shifted, revealing not a British airman, but a young girl in a soot-stained dress, her blonde hair in disarrayed braids. Marcel froze in confusion. "Child, what are you doing here?" He spoke gently in French, then, noting her uncomprehending expression, tried the German he had learned during the occupation. "Kind, bist du verletzt?" The girl's eyes widened with recognition of the language. "Hilfe bitte," she responded, her voice trembling. "Ich bin Elise." Marcel's mind raced. A German child, near a downed British bomber, miles from any town. The transport truck, he realized, must have been hit by falling debris or caught in the bombing. He saw no sign of other survivors. "Are you hurt?" he asked in halting German. The girl shook her head, then pointed to her ankle, wincing. "Can you walk?" She attempted to stand, only to collapse immediately. Marcel made his decision. Regardless of nationality, he could not leave a child alone in a war zone at night. He lifted her carefully, noting how light she seemed. "I will take you somewhere safe," he said, speaking slowly. "Then tomorrow, we will find your people." The girl, Elise, she had called herself, nodded, exhaustion and shock evident in her expression. Marcel carried her toward the farmhouse, his mind cataloguing the risks. Harboring anyone without reporting to authorities was prohibited. If she was connected to German military personnel, the consequences could be severe, yet leaving her was unthinkable. By midnight, Marcel had settled Elise on the small cot in what had once been François' room. Her ankle was swollen but not broken, a sprain that would heal with rest. More concerning was the state of shock. She had spoken little since their initial encounter, answering his basic questions with single words. She was 12 years old. She had been traveling with others. She did not know what happened to them. Marcel prepared a simple broth, recalling how Mathilde had tended François through childhood illnesses. "You must eat something," he encouraged, sitting beside the cot. "Food will help you feel stronger." Elise accepted the bowl with shaking hands. "Danke," she whispered. "My name is Marcel Beaumont," he said, maintaining his broken German. "You are safe here." "Where am I?" "My farm, near Rethel." He hesitated, then asked, "Your family?" "Who should I contact?" Elise's expression crumpled. "My father, he is—" She stopped, uncertainty crossing her features. After a moment's hesitation, she simply said, "A soldier." Marcel nodded, understanding her reluctance. Children were often instructed not to discuss their parents' military positions. "Rest now. Tomorrow we will figure out what to do." After Elise had fallen into exhausted sleep, Marcel sat by his fireplace contemplating his situation. The practical course would be to report to the village authorities immediately, yet something held him back, perhaps the memory of François, who might himself be in need of shelter somewhere. Perhaps the simple human connection that transcended the artificial boundaries of conflict. "What would you advise, Matilda?" he asked the photograph. His wife had possessed an unerring moral compass. The answer came to him in her voice. The child first, politics second. Marcel decided he would wait one day before reporting anything. Allow the girl to recover from shock. Perhaps she would remember details that would help reunite her with her father without involving authorities unnecessarily. Dawn broke with clear skies and the distant rumble of artillery. The front was moving closer. Marcel tended his meager livestock, 2 goats and several chickens, before checking on his unexpected guest. He found Elise awake, examining the small bookshelf that contained François' childhood collection. "Good morning," Marcel greeted her. "How is your ankle?" "Better, thank you," she replied, her German now mixed with attempted French words. "These books, they are in French." "My son's," Marcel explained, "from when he was young." Elise selected a volume with illustrations of animals. "I learned some French at school, before." She trailed off, the before requiring no explanation. Marcel prepared a simple breakfast of bread and goat cheese. As they ate, he observed Elise carefully. Her clothing was of good quality despite the damage from the previous night's ordeal. Her manner of speaking suggested education. Her father, he surmised, was likely an officer rather than an enlisted man. "Elise," he began carefully, "I need to report finding you. The authorities will help locate your father." Fear flashed across her face. "Please, no, not yet." She hesitated, then added, "The soldiers here, some are not good men." Marcel understood immediately. Even among occupying forces, there were significant differences in conduct. Some units maintained professional discipline. Others were known for brutality. The girl's fear might be well-founded. "One day," he compromised. "We will wait one day. Your father will be searching for you." Relief softened her features. "Thank you, Monsieur Beaumont." "Marcel," he corrected. "If we are to be friends for a day, you should call me Marcel." That morning established a tentative routine. Marcel showed Elise around the small farmhouse, explaining in his limited German the operation of his simple existence. She listened attentively, occasionally helping despite her injured ankle. When Marcel mentioned having to check his eastern field, Elise asked to accompany him, unwilling to be left alone. Together they walked slowly, Marcel supporting her when necessary. The October sun provided welcome warmth against the autumn chill. In the eastern field, Marcel demonstrated how he tested soil readiness for planting. "My grandfather had a farm," Elise offered unexpectedly, "in Bavaria. We visited every summer before the war." "Did you enjoy it there?" Marcel asked, grateful for any conversation that might ease the girl's anxiety. "It was peaceful." Elise's expression grew distant. "No aircraft, no sirens." Marcel nodded, understanding. "War makes us appreciate peace." "Father says war is sometimes necessary to create lasting peace." Elise recited this as if from memory, then looked up at Marcel. "Do you believe that?" The question caught Marcel off guard. Philosophical discussions with a 12-year-old had not been part of his expected day. "I believe," he said carefully, "that ordinary people rarely want war. Leaders declare wars. Soldiers fight them. Farmers, bakers, teachers. We simply try to survive them." Elise considered this seriously. "Father is a good man. He follows orders. But he is kind when others are not." "I am sure he is," Marcel replied, struck by her need to defend her father to a stranger. "And he must be very worried about you. He is brave. He does not worry easily." Despite her words, Elise's voice carried doubt. As they returned to the farmhouse, Marcel noticed increased military traffic on the distant main road. German vehicles moving eastward. The front was shifting. Even here in his isolated corner, the war's momentum was palpable. Lieutenant Colonel Wagner had not slept. The command post, severely damaged but still operational, buzzed with activity as communication systems were restored and casualty reports compiled. The bombing had been more effective than anticipated, destroying 70% of fuel reserves and disabling critical communications infrastructure. More concerning to Wagner was the news that Transport Convoy 3, the one carrying his daughter, had not arrived at fallback position Delta. "Report from reconnaissance units, sir," Captain Möller reported, his own exhaustion evident. Convoy 3 was observed approximately 7 kilometers east of Checkpoint 9. Evidence of aerial attack consistent with Allied fighter strafing. 3 vehicles disabled, 2 on fire. Wagner maintained his composure through force of will. Survivors? Recovery teams report 14 casualties, 8 survivors located and transported to field hospital. Identification efforts ongoing. "And my daughter?" Wagner's voice remained steady despite the fear gripping his chest. Möller hesitated. "Not among those recovered, sir. Search operations continue." Wagner studied the operational map, his mind calculating possibilities despite the personal anguish threatening to overwhelm military discipline. The area has numerous farms and small holdings. If she survived and became separated from the convoy, she would seek shelter. "I've authorized expanded search parameters, sir. 2 platoons are conducting systematic—" "Not sufficient," Wagner interrupted. "Captain, you will personally coordinate search operations. Redirect resources from secondary objectives. My daughter is priority alpha." "Sir, command protocols state that personnel resources cannot be—" "I am well aware of protocols, Captain." Wagner's tone silenced further objection. "Elise is not merely my daughter. She carries identification documents that, if intercepted by resistance elements, would compromise operational security across the sector." The justification was tenuous at best. Wagner knew it, and Müller recognized the rationalization for what it was. Nevertheless, the order was logged and search operations expanded. Somewhere in the French countryside, Wagner's daughter, and his last connection to humanity beyond war, was missing. By midday, Marcel and Elise had settled into an unexpected companionship. The girl's resilience impressed him. Despite her ordeal, she maintained composure beyond her years. She had helped Marcel prepare a simple lunch, her movements careful due to her injured ankle, but her determination evident. "You cook better than my father," she commented as they ate. "He burns everything except coffee." Marcel smiled, remembering his own early attempts at cooking after Mathilde's passing. "Necessity teaches skills. Before my wife died, I could barely boil water. My mother died too," Elise offered quietly. "In Berlin. The bombers came in the night." The simple statement struck Marcel deeply. The abstract concept of strategic bombing became suddenly, painfully concrete. A child losing her mother. Yet this child was German, the daughter of a man who likely ordered actions that brought similar grief to French families. The complexities of war, the interconnected web of suffering, weighed heavily. "I am sorry," Marcel said simply. "No child should lose a parent to war. Father says we must be strong, for Germany." Elise's words carried the rote quality of repeated instruction, yet her expression revealed the inadequacy of such consolation. "Grief requires no nationality," Marcel responded. "It is human to mourn those we love." The afternoon passed with Marcel attending to farm tasks while Elise rested, occasionally reading from François's books, sounding out French words with determined concentration. By late afternoon, Marcel's concerns about their situation had grown. Military activity on the main road had increased substantially. The likelihood of patrols extending to outlying areas seemed greater. His concerns materialized as evening approached. The sound of vehicles on the rarely used track leading toward his farm prompted Marcel to move quickly to the window. 2 German military trucks approaching, soldiers visible in the back of each. "Elise," he called urgently. "There are soldiers coming, German soldiers." Hope and apprehension crossed her face simultaneously. "My father?" "I cannot tell, but you must decide quickly. Do you wish me to tell them you are here?" Elise hesitated, her 12-year-old mind processing complex calculations. "Are they Waffen-SS?" she asked finally, surprising Marcel with her specificity. Marcel examined the approaching vehicles more carefully. "Regular army, I believe. Wehrmacht." Relief softened her features. "Then yes, please tell them. But," she hesitated, "may I stay here until they confirm they can take me to my father?" Marcel nodded, understanding. "Wait in François' room. I will speak with them first." The truck stopped in the farmyard, and 8 soldiers disembarked. A sergeant approached the house while others established a perimeter with practiced efficiency. Marcel opened his door before they could knock, presenting the appearance of compliance that had kept him safe throughout the occupation. "Guten Abend," he greeted them in his limited German. "How may I help you?" The sergeant responded in accented but comprehensible French. "We are searching for survivors from a transport convoy. Have you seen any German personnel in this area since yesterday evening?" Marcel maintained a neutral expression. "I heard aircraft and explosions to the north last night. This morning I observed increased traffic on the main road. Nothing else unusual." The sergeant studied Marcel with professional suspicion. "We will need to search your property. Routine procedure." "Of course," Marcel agreed readily, "though I live alone, so there is little to see." The search was conducted with brisk thoroughness. 2 soldiers examined the barn and outbuildings, while 2 more entered the house. Marcel followed them, maintaining an appropriately deferential demeanor, while positioning himself to intervene if necessary. The soldiers checked the kitchen and main room efficiently, then moved toward the bedrooms. Elise made the decision for herself. As the soldiers approached François' room, she opened the door and stepped out, her posture straightening despite her injured ankle. "Ich bin Elise Wagner," she announced with unexpected authority, "Tochter von Oberstleutnant Heinrich Wagner, 7. Armee." The effect was immediate. The soldiers straightened to attention, recognition evident in their expressions. The sergeant hurried forward, relief visible beneath military discipline. "Fräulein Wagner, we have been searching since dawn. Your father has ordered—" He stopped, switching to German to continue the conversation. Marcel watched the exchange, understanding fragments. The soldiers were clearly aware of Elise's importance. The sergeant radioed their position immediately, receiving rapid instructions in return. Within minutes, the atmosphere transformed from search operation to protective detail, with Marcel's farm becoming an impromptu security post. The sergeant approached Marcel, his manner significantly more respectful. "The farmer, he found you after the attack?" he asked Elise in German. "Yes. He has been kind. He treated my injury and gave me food and shelter." The sergeant nodded, then addressed Marcel in French. "You will be compensated for your assistance. Lieutenant Colonel Wagner expresses his gratitude." Marcel shrugged. "I did what anyone would do for a child in need." The sergeant's expression suggested this was far from universally true. "The colonel will arrive within the hour. We will maintain security until then." The transformation of his quiet farm into a military position discomforted Marcel, but he had little choice but to acquiesce. Elise remained near him, her earlier comfort in his presence apparently undiminished by the arrival of her countrymen. They sat together on the porch as the October evening descended, soldiers patrolling the perimeter of his property with professional focus. "Your father? He must be an important man," Marcel observed quietly. Elise nodded. "He commands many soldiers. He has medals for bravery." She hesitated, then added, "He will reward you for helping me." Marcel shook his head. "No reward is necessary. Humanity should require no payment." The girl studied him with serious eyes. "You are a good man, Marcel. Like my grandfather. He disagreed with the government sometimes, but he never said so where others could hear." The implication of her words, the careful silence maintained even by those with private doubts, reflected the reality of life under authoritarian control. Marcel wondered about her father. Was he a true believer in the regime, or a professional soldier following orders with private reservations? The distinction might mean little to those affected by his commands, yet Marcel found himself hoping, for Elise's sake, that her father possessed the moral complexity she seemed to recognize in her grandfather. Lieutenant Colonel Wagner arrived at 1900 hours precisely. His staff car preceded and followed by military vehicles containing additional security personnel. Marcel observed the convoy's approach with trepidation. The father Elise described might be grateful for assistance to his daughter, or might view a French farmer with inherent suspicion. Wagner emerged from his vehicle, his uniform impeccable despite evident exhaustion. His eyes scanned the farm before settling on the porch where Marcel and Elise sat. Military discipline visibly warred with paternal concern as he approached at a precisely measured pace that nevertheless conveyed urgency. "Vater!" Elise rose despite her injured ankle, her composure finally yielding to childlike relief. Wagner reached the porch, acknowledging his daughter with a formal nod that did little to mask the emotion in his eyes. "Elise, you appear unharmed." "My ankle is injured. Herr Beaumont has been caring for me." She gestured to Marcel, who had risen and stood awkwardly, uncertain of proper protocol. Wagner turned his attention to Marcel, studying him with an assessing gaze that seemed to catalogue every detail. When he spoke, it was in surprisingly fluent French. "You found my daughter after the transport was attacked?" "Yes, Colonel. Near a crashed aircraft to the east of my property." Marcel maintained a respectful tone while meeting Wagner's gaze directly. "She needed shelter." Wagner nodded once. "And you provided this without notifying authorities immediately." The statement carried no obvious accusation, yet Marcel sensed the potential danger. "She was frightened and injured. I intended to report to the village authorities today, but your men arrived first." "Father," Elise interjected, "he has been kind. He shared his food. He told me about his son in Paris and his wife who died." Something in Wagner's expression shifted subtly. "You have a son?" "Yes, Colonel, Francois. He left for Paris before the war." "And you have had no contact with him since?" The question carried implications Marcel understood immediately. Suspected resistance connections. "A letter nearly a year ago. Nothing since." Wagner held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded again. "Captain Müller will provide appropriate compensation for your assistance to my daughter. As I told the sergeant, no compensation is necessary. Nevertheless, it will be provided." Wagner turned to Elise. "We must depart immediately. The tactical situation is evolving." Elise glanced at Marcel, then back to her father. "May I say goodbye properly?" A flicker of impatience crossed Wagner's features, quickly suppressed. "Of course. Captain Müller will assist you to the vehicle when you are ready." He addressed Marcel once more. "A moment of your time, Monsieur Beaumont." In private. Marcel followed Wagner several paces from the porch, curious and wary. The colonel surveyed the farm, his assessment professional rather than personal. "Your property appears well maintained despite the challenges of these times." "I manage with what is available," Marcel responded neutrally. Wagner nodded. "You should be aware that the front will reach this area within 72 hours. Allied forces are advancing more rapidly than anticipated." The information surprised Marcel, not the content, but that Wagner would share it. "Thank you for the warning. You should consider moving eastward temporarily. Combat operations will likely affect this immediate area." Marcel shook his head. "This farm is all I have, Colonel. I have survived occupation, I will survive liberation." Something resembling respect flickered in Wagner's eyes. "As you wish." He hesitated, then added, "My daughter's mother was killed in an Allied bombing 3 months ago. Elise has spoken little since. Today she spoke of you and your farm at length." He paused again. "Children often recognize something in the character of others that we adults, particularly those of us in military service, sometimes fail to perceive." Before Marcel could respond, Wagner continued, his tone returning to formal military precision. "Official records will indicate that my daughter was recovered by regular patrol activities. Your involvement will not be documented." Marcel understood the implication. Protection from potential accusations of collaboration. "Thank you, Colonel. I suggest you maintain no records or recollections of this encounter, Monsieur Beaumont, for your own security." Wagner extended his hand in a gesture that seemed to surprise even himself. "The fortunes of war are unpredictable. Not all officers of the Reich would acknowledge the debt I owe you." Marcel accepted the handshake, Struck by the complexity of the moment, a French farmer and a German officer connected briefly by the simple humanity of caring for a child. "I wish you and your daughter safety, Colonel, whatever comes." Wagner nodded once, then turned with military precision and returned to where Elise waited. Marcel observed their interaction, formal by civilian standards, yet containing visible affection through subtle gestures. Wagner listened attentively as Elise spoke, his expression softening momentarily before military bearing reasserted itself. Elise returned to Marcel, escorted by Captain Müller, but moving with determination despite her injury. "I must go now," she said in her mixture of German and attempted French. "Thank you for your kindness, Marcel." "You are welcome, Elise. Perhaps when peace comes, you will visit again and see the eastern field when it is planted." She smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her serious features. "I would like that." She hesitated, then added, "I have something for you." From her pocket she withdrew a folded paper, offering it with solemn ceremony. "To remember." Marcel accepted it, recognizing a page from the notebook she had carried. Unfolded, it revealed a detailed drawing of his farmhouse, rendered with remarkable skill for one so young. In the corner, in careful script, "For Marcel, who showed kindness when it was needed most. Your friend, Elise Wagner." "It is beautiful," Marcel said sincerely. "I will keep it always." Elise nodded, satisfied, then allowed Captain Müller to escort her to the waiting staff car. Within minutes, the convoy had departed, leaving Marcel alone in the gathering darkness of his farm. He studied the drawing in the fading light, struck by how accurately Elise had captured the weathered charm of his modest home. The eastern front of the house featured prominently in the sketch, the side where the sun rose each morning. The symbolism was not lost on Marcel. Within 72 hours, according to Wagner, liberation would reach his small corner of France. The occupation that had dominated 5 years of his life would end, bringing new challenges and, perhaps, new beginnings. 3 days later, as predicted, Allied forces reached Marcel's region. German forces executed a strategic withdrawal, minimizing direct combat near his farm. Marcel observed the transformation from his porch, German vehicles retreating eastward one day, Allied tanks advancing the following morning. A young American lieutenant visited the farm, asking standard intelligence questions about German troop movements. Marcel provided what little information he had, omitting any mention of Elise or her father. When asked if he had experienced any difficulties during occupation, Marcel simply responded, "I survived, Lieutenant. Many did not. I consider myself fortunate." 2 months later, as winter settled across the liberated countryside, Marcel received an unexpected visitor. A French officer from the provisional government arrived with official documentation. "Monsieur Beaumont, I bring news of your son, François." Marcel's heart constricted. "He is alive, monsieur, and well. He has been working with resistance intelligence in Paris. His activities required absolute secrecy until now." Relief flooded through Marcel. "When may I see him?" "He has been given a week's leave. He should arrive tomorrow." The officer hesitated. "There is something else. Your son's unit received intelligence from an unusual source, a German officer who provided critical information before the Allied advance. This intelligence saved many lives, both military and civilian." Marcel maintained a carefully neutral expression. "The war creates strange situations." "Indeed." The officer produced an official envelope. "This was found among captured German communications. It is addressed to you." Alone that evening, Marcel opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a brief note written in formal French, the handwriting precise and military. "Monsieur Beaumont, circumstances have separated my daughter and me from our homeland. Before these events occurred, she insisted I send you this. She believes the eastern field will be particularly beautiful in spring. With respect, H.W." Accompanying the note was a second drawing, Elise's farmhouse again, but now the eastern field bloomed with wheat, golden under a summer sun. In the field stood 3 figures, a man Marcel recognized as himself, a tall military figure, and between them a young girl with braided hair. Marcel placed the drawing beside the first on his mantelpiece, below Mathilde's photograph. The juxtaposition struck him, his beloved wife who had taught him compassion, and the unexpected evidence that such compassion could transcend the artificial boundaries of conflict. The following day, François returned home. As father and son embraced on the porch of the farmhouse that had awaited his return, Marcel felt the weight of occupation lifting at last. Later, showing François the eastern field and his plans for spring planting, Marcel shared the story of Elise and her father. François listened in astonishment. The intelligence officer, Wagner, he provided information that saved my entire unit. We never understood why. Marcel studied the distant horizon where the eastern field met the morning sky. Perhaps even in the darkest times we are not as different as we are taught to believe. In the spring of 1945, as predicted, the eastern field yielded its first full harvest since before the war. Marcel sent a portion to François in Paris, where he now worked helping to rebuild a shattered nation. He kept Elise's drawings displayed prominently, a reminder of unexpected connections formed during humanity's darkest hours. After the war ended, Marcel received one final communication, a postcard from Bavaria with no return address, showing mountains unlike the gentle fields of northern France. The message consisted of a single line: "The eastern field remains in our thoughts. E.W." Marcel never learned what ultimately happened to Lieutenant Colonel Wagner or his daughter. Like millions of stories from the greatest conflict in human history, theirs remained incomplete, fragments of humanity amid industrialized destruction. Yet in his small farmhouse, tending fields that continued to yield their bounty year after year, Marcel maintained his belief that the connection formed during those October days represented something profound: the enduring power of compassion to transcend the artificial barriers erected by conflict. In 1959, when François returned to take over the farm after Marcel's health began to fail, he found his father's most treasured possessions carefully preserved: Mathilde's photograph and 2 drawings by a German girl who had once found shelter after a bombing, unaware of the connections her presence would forge between enemies. François maintained the tradition his father had established, ensuring the eastern field was always planted first each spring. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II, and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.